Hello, everyone. I'm Jen Riggins over here talking to members of the community of IR Global. And today we're talking about establishing a business in the state of Arizona and what that means, what that doesn't mean, and anything we can learn about that. So I have Matthew Harrison on the call. I invite you to please introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Matthew Harrison. I'm the principal attorney and founder of Harrison Law. I'm based in the metropolitan Phoenix, Arizona area. And a little bit about myself, I've been practicing law a little bit over 25 years and started my individual practice and started Harrison Law approximately 14 years ago. And before that, I worked for mid-sized complex commercial litigation firm in Phoenix, Arizona. And before that, I was a deputy county attorney. So I've done a little bit of everything.
Okay, fair enough. And then who should be listening to this conversation? Who would be most interested?
I think the primary individuals would be those who either want to start a business or already have an established business and they just want to have some additional information to help their decision making. A lot of what we'll talk about here today is appears as just those who says, okay, I want to start a business. Well, how do I go about doing that? What's going to be the best business avenues? What's going to be the best legal options? And so that would really be, I think, the two key people, and that goes right in line with what my firm does. My firm represents businesses and those who own and operate businesses. We're a boutique law firm, and we just kind of have that narrow focus. We're not gonna be everything to everyone, but that's why I think we can help people today.
Well, I think in the age of AI, we will learn greater and greater that humans that bring specialization are what will add value.
Yeah.
So for those you said businesses or people starting businesses, does this mean I guess this may be my tech background. So for me, companies are either started in California or Delaware. Delaware for tax reasons, California for California reasons. Um, but of course, does this tend to be people that are already located in Arizona, or are you kind of making the case for Arizona as a place to start your business, or?
Well, I think that a couple things. First, if, to back up a little bit when it comes to incorporation in Delaware or incorporation in California, that is more of a, I would call an old school view of corporate organization. Delaware was the primary location for corporations to begin back and start in the 1970s, over 50 years ago. And the reason why is they had a robust business corporation law in Delaware, and they made a little bit of a niche on there. However, they don't have that exclusivity anymore. Every state has essentially caught up with Delaware and has either very similar or better circumstances than Delaware does. So in the old school thought of incorporating in Delaware is just been essentially eliminated the last 20 years. And especially this last year, where, and people have probably seen it in the news, is where major corporations are now moving from Delaware to another state, primarily for two reasons. Number one, for tax purposes, because Delaware has and other states have a better tax structure than Delaware certainly does. And second is for regulatory reasons, is that there's been a concern that the Delaware courts have become too proactive, where they used to be kind of neutral pro-business. They're becoming more of an advocacy area than a business neutral area. And for that reason, businesses don't like advocacy. They're going to move to a location that gives them the independence to be able to thrive. So I would never encourage anyone to go to Delaware nowadays. It's not necessary. When it comes to California, if you're starting a business in California and you're physically located in California, maybe you'd want to do California. However, the big issue with California nowadays is the high regulatory control in California. I mean, they're micromanaging every aspect of a business, both for tax purposes and just for regulatory purposes. And typically when I talk to startups and they say, I want to start a business in California, I say, are you really sure about that? Because there's a lot of issues. And then I refer them to a California-based business attorney. And that business attorney, the first phone call says, do you really want to do this? Because right now it's that crazy in California. And especially for a startup, where you're just getting things rolling, you don't really have the financial backing. Why are you spending money having to comply with regulatory and other issues that you don't have in other states? And so that's unless you're physically going to be present, you're a startup in Silicon Valley, you're going to be based in Silicon Valley. There's no reason to base a business in California. So places like Arizona are really good locations to start a business, where we have a robust corporation law in Arizona. We're catering to businesses as they come in because of our vicinity to California. We have a lot of California transplants as well that are kind of leaving that regulatory and other businesses, and they're transferring their corporations to Arizona or starting their businesses here because it's far easier to do so. And lastly, in Arizona, and specifically a lot in the Phoenix metropolitan area, we have a lot of international corporations that are establishing their manufacturing other hubs in Arizona, a lot of times in the tech industry. One of the largest um, corporations that manufacture here is Intel, and the soon to be second largest is Taiwan Semiconductor. They're all basing themselves in Arizona for a reason. So tech startups, there's a lot of new tech startups in Arizona because now they're next to where the business in action is going to as well. So from a kind of a long answer to a short question, that's why I definitely encourage people not to just incorporate in Delaware or California. It's not a place. And if you're going to do business in Arizona or you want to base your location in Arizona, it certainly is the best place to be. One of the reasons why Arizona is growing in the business area is a few items. Primarily is location. We're close enough to California and the West Coast where you're able to take advantage of that market in a lot of different areas. Number two, the regulatory structure is a lot easier than it is in California, and it provides a lot less strict guidance in certain areas, especially not just in areas of corporate structure, but areas of taxation, employment law, um, construction of locations and items like that. Another item that Arizona has a lot of benefit is an infrastructure, where they've built an infrastructure that allows for corporations to come in and build a business. It's not landlocked as California is, where real estate's at a premium, and you can still, for your manufacturing and kind of larger investments, get a location that has that as well. Plus, you're going to be around other tech companies that are doing the very same thing as well. And then lastly, I mean, the weather and climate is great in Arizona. From a living standpoint, is mild in the winter. Does it get hot in the summer? Yeah, it gets hot, but you kind of get used to it. But it allows you to do a lot of outdoor activities. And as I tell my northern businesses, is that you don't have to shovel sunshine. And so it's a good place to go if you have a business.
That is beautiful. You don't have to shovel sunshine. So now that you've made the case for Arizona, what do you need to know to establish a business in Arizona? What are the different things you have to set up, et cetera?
Well, I think the main issue is, and I always tell people when they come in for an initial consultation, is that whoever you are, whether it be just a solo individual, whether it be a group of people who want to start a business together, is that you define the relationship you want with your business and how you want to interact with each other in the business. And once you have that in mind, it's easy to find a corporate structure that will work for whatever that relationship is. In Arizona, usually the best corporate structure to start a business is a limited liability company.
Right.
A limited liability company they kind of started about 50 plus years ago, but it's the easiest startup to do. And basically, it allows you to have either just one individual member or multiple members. It allows you to grow. It doesn't have the same regulatory issues that, say, a corporation that has shares or other securities has to have. It allows for you not having to report to the Corporation Commission in Arizona, and it provides you an indefinite term that you can have the LLC as well. So from a startup standpoint, you want something that's easy, that can be very simply structured to whatever your circumstances are, and then adapt as you grow, and usually that's going to be an LLC. Eventually, some businesses reach what I refer to as the Inc. stage, where they're an actual corporation with securities or shares. But realistically, that's not a startup. That's something that's been established that now has multiple potential partners, now has the potential for shareholders, and needs to have that from an investment purposes standpoint. Maybe the thought for them is that they'll go public eventually. But that's not a startup, and you don't want to buy a Rolls Royce or run or maintain a Rolls Royce when a nice Honda CRV will do for the startup. So that's why I always tell people when it comes to LLCs.
Okay, and usually are these companies looking to establish in Arizona as their first location? Or also, I assume if you're in IR Global, it's quite an international marketplace type of thing or community. Are you also having international companies looking to establish their first US base there, or and what's needed then?
They can, for international individuals or entities, usually when they want to incorporate in Arizona, they're doing it for a couple of reasons. Number one, that they are just going to invest something in Arizona for some reason. Either they're going to open up that area as a market, or they're investing in something specifically like real estate and other items like that. So a lot of times with the international companies we have coming to Arizona, they of course have their international corporations, and they might have different companies based in other states, but they also have a corporation or corporations in Arizona to handle those real estate purchases like separate corporations and other items that you would do in order to establish yourself. And then a lot of times these larger international corporations, of course, have their base of operations internationally. They then have a smaller base of operations in some state, which could be Arizona. But if it's not Arizona, then they're doing what they need to essentially have that international or foreign corporation be able to do business in Arizona. And part of doing business in Arizona is allowing them to incorporate different companies in Arizona as well. So a lot of the international clients I have, it fits into that category. They're having to do something specifically in Arizona, so they need to make sure they can properly operate in Arizona. And then number two, maybe create then a corporate structure that's Arizona specific for whatever their Arizona goal is. And it just depends on the corporate need, how many layers of potential separation they need to have from the primary corporation. So a lot of times for international, they might be initially based in the states outside of Arizona, maybe, and they often say, for an example, Delaware, and again, because they think Delaware is the place to
Right.
go.
Yeah, there is
Uh,
that European stereotype. Yeah, I
yeah,
do.
we would do something like organize them as a foreign corporation doing business in Arizona so that they can do business in Arizona as a Delaware company. And then you might have some, almost subsidiaries would be maybe Arizona-based corporations.
Okay. Great. And then what are some of the compliance requirements? I know it's more lax, but of course there are some compliance requirements in Arizona, right? What are those things that those that are listening need to know?
Well, from an Arizona specific company, I mean, there's still laws and regulations just like there would be in any state, including California. They're just usually less onerous than, say, California would be. And usually to have the proper corporation, you're established it and have it approved with the Arizona Corporation Commission. That gets you your essentially license to do business in Arizona. And if you're a foreign corporation, you designate yourself as a foreign corporation doing business in Arizona with the blessing of the Corporation Commission. It's the same kind of regulatory issues. Once you're established, then you're establishing the key items that you need. Say for a startup, then you're establishing like the proper taxpayer ID. You're making sure you've obtained any licenses you need because of the type of work you're doing. You might, depending on what kind of if you're a retail location or something like that, you might be getting was often referred to as a TPT or transaction privilege tax number. You're still doing those typical things you would do in any state. It just may be a little bit more, a little less hoops to jump through, a little bit more straight to the point. And so that way you can establish yourself like any business. You'll get a business license for the city you're located in, and you're still responsible to make sure you're in compliance with Arizona's regulations, which definitely still exist, but they're a lot less penalty driven than say other states would be.
And then besides that you don't get to make snow angels, what are maybe some downsides or some hurdles that listeners need to be aware of?
I think I'll start out with like the smaller startups and I'll move up to like bigger corporations that kind of come in. For a startup, my main concern is that they have an organization and a plan in place. And I'll often encourage startups that they don't want they should be thinking about their business and working with their potential partners on what they want several months before they come in to meet with me. They almost have to have a business plan in place, and then I'm just starting the corporate structure, which makes my job a lot easier. A lot of times, I have businesses, and I use the analogy is it's kind of like let's start a rock and roll band analogy, is that I'll have some potential prospective businesses and startups come in, and they're excited. They're really thrilled about things, kind of like someone starting a rock and roll band in their garage at home with their friends, and they're thinking about the t-shirts that they're going to sell at their sold out stadium shows instead of worrying about practicing to become better. And so a lot of times that's what I'm going to encourage businesses to do is to practice to become better. And then we'll establish the corporate structure. And that makes it a lot easier to happen because everything will then fall from that. For example, one of the biggest risks small businesses have and startups have is usually that, and the first major thing that they'll sign outside of a corporation structure is maybe a commercial lease. Where are they going to do business at? Where are they going to conduct their business? Is it going to be a retail location or not? That first lease can make or break you because that lease is for multiple years with set amounts. And if you breach that lease, they're going to go after the entire lease term, which is usually 5 to 10 years. So hundreds of thousands of dollars of liability. And oh, by the way, they're going to want a personal guarantee before they actually have you have a lease. That's probably the best. That is the fastest route to fail for a business to fail is to make that wrong decision in that first major decision, which is the commercial lease. So that's what encouraging prospective people to do is that circumstances and to avoid those pitfalls. When it comes to foreign corporations, first one I'll say national foreign corporations, which are those based originally in the United States. They just have to make sure that they're following the regulatory guidelines of entering the state, which are pretty much spelled out, but sometimes they just don't remember to follow them. Or they have their attorney in Wisconsin try to practice law in Arizona, and they get themselves into trouble because they're just not doing it right. That's why an Arizona-based attorney is appropriate. That's why I'm not practicing law in Wisconsin, and I don't feel like they should be doing the same. They need to know that. For a foreign corporation, it's the same thing. It's just getting yourself properly initially started as a foreign corporation. They have to be aware of both state regulations, but also federal law because they're coming into Arizona originally. And you have to just make sure that you're following both. For example, I'll give you a kind of a worst case scenario or a negative example. Sometimes we'll have individuals who are residents or citizens of a foreign state, and they want to come in and invest in a company in Arizona. So they want to take their foreign assets and then come into Arizona to invest. Now, could they do that? Yes, but they need to follow some specific regulatory guidelines from both a federal standpoint, and most importantly, and then a little bit with the state standpoint. And so a lot of times I'll tell these foreign investors that the first issue you need to do is find out what's going to happen to your assets you plan on investing in this company in Arizona, both from the location that you're at, but as it comes into the United States. And a lot of times, depending on the foreign country, they're none too excited about losing assets to go to another foreign location. And a lot of times these fiery ideas of let's start a rock and roll band fade away because they find out that the country of origin just is not going to allow them to do what they want to. So that's something they really need to keep in mind as well. But once they're here and they have the original items established, foreign corporations can act just like somebody who lived down the street and started a company. It's just doing it right the first time.
Okay, and then what about once you've gone through all this rigmarole to set it up, both in state and federal perhaps? Uh, what goes into managing an Arizona business?
Usually managing it, you're gonna think of it in a couple of different ways. Number one, are you going to be the manager as the business owner, or are you going to have a company or an individual manage your corporation for you? And I'm just going to pause for a second because my light went off in my room. I'll come
Oh,
back first.
yeah.
And so that's going to be your key decision. Are you going to be making the day-to-day decisions, or are you hiring somebody to make the day-to-day decisions? Usually for a startup, you're going to be making the day-to-day decisions, and it's usually the best situation for you. The second step is then going to be, okay, what do I need to establish myself from a corporate legal document standpoint? And typically that is originating or what initial contracts you're going to have in order to conduct your business, what kind of employment situations are you going to have as you conduct your business, and making sure you have the appropriate employment documents, say like an employment contract or employee policy manual or items like that. So you're establishing those individual kind of initial documents that you need to have. And then you're also just dealing with whatever documents or contracts you're going to have as you're dealing with third parties, such as a landlord or a client or a customer. And so a lot of what we do initially is we create these general documents or general agreements so that they're able to fulfill their responsibilities there. And a lot of time when we draft these, they're kind of what I refer to as template documents. It's not like we have to draft a brand new document every time a new employee comes in, or every time a new vendor is hired or you're hired as a vendor. But we're just creating these templates that then they can kind of fill in some names and numbers, and they can basically conduct business that way. So that's really important to have. You have those initial documents in place, that's what helps you. Again, from a startup, a handshake agreement's not an agreement. A verbal promise is not a promise. And a lot of times you have to kind of remember that. And although you're establishing relationships and you want to have people or other businesses recommend you or like you, uh, a good business partner is going to anticipate that you're going to handle this like a business, like having proper contracts and agreements in place. And if you play fast and loose with that, it's just a recipe for disaster. Eventually, it will get to any business. You may be successful for a little while, but this is the growing pains that new startups see, is that they have a business concept and they're just not able to grow because they don't have the format and procedures in place. And that often stops them, is because they cannot do that because they haven't properly set themselves up contractually and otherwise.
Okay, and you were talking about conducting business, so I have to make a pun. But you did say like the two largest chip or semiconductor manufacturers are based in Arizona. Are there benefits to being based in Arizona because you access these somewhat still limited resources? They're not as limited as they were a couple years ago, but there's still going to be an extraordinary demand as we our use of AI, et cetera. So are there interstate deals that tend to go more easily, or contracts or partners and things? Is there logic behind that in being based in Arizona?
I think that from a standpoint of saying, we'll use the tech industry as an example, I think it's always good, and you'll always see this, you'll even see this in Silicon Valley and other locations, is that you will see that there's a major reason people are there, either the Hewlett Packards of the world or the Apples of the world. And because there's this major corporation there, satellite corporations will form around that major corporation because they know that part of what they're doing is that they're either able to do business with that major corporation or they're able to offer something to the general public that utilizing that major business's whatever manufacturing products allows them to do. And you'll also see it from an intellectual standpoint, because a lot of times the people who are with these major corporations will say, hey, I'm going to start my own business. I want to start my own company. I have this business concept. And so there'll just be a satellite that is based there. So we see a lot of that in Arizona, is that once we see a major corporation come in, um, then there's often satellite and accompanying businesses that will all of a sudden start to form around it. And we're seeing that already. Taiwan Semiconductor is building their chip plant here. You're already seeing that. Another example is in LG, which is a Korean-based company, basically is starting a manufacturing plant in Arizona. And because there is that location in Arizona, all of a sudden these other international businesses that do business with LG come to Arizona. And then there's these startup satellite businesses that say, hey, because LG is manufacturing these items in Arizona, we're going to be utilizing them. We might as well just be a couple miles away from them, not a few thousand miles away from them. So you'll see that as well.
And of course, services that then serve those businesses. It brings up economy around restaurants or
Yeah.
other things that build up as you build smaller business communities and they start to grow. So that's always wonderful to see.
Yeah, you'll always see that when it comes to that. And then because once those major businesses start, you need to have a transportation corridor. And a transportation corridor means you have those businesses like restaurants and other items that then come in from more of a service industry. And then you need commercial buildings, because where are these satellite companies going to go? And we'll see that as well. That's something that's especially going on here in the Southeast Valley, where I'm based out of in Phoenix, is they literally have a national international airport, not the major one in Phoenix, but one, and they have an enterprise zones that are specifically catered for national and international companies to base themselves nearby, because there's an airport, easy access in and out, and then you have these international national zones which have been established. And so companies like LG take advantage of that. And other companies take advantage of that because now they can have they're still an international presence, but they have specific tax advantages by being in an enterprise zone or a trade zone like that too.
And I guess it's well suited with the weather because LG stands for life is good. So that's not a bad circumstance to be in. If
Yeah.
people want to ask you more questions, of course, we'll share this and they can leave comments in the YouTube video or on the LinkedIn sharing and all. But if people want to contact you and learn more about this, ask some more questions, what's the best way?
Probably the best way is two. As number one, of course, they can always email my firm, and my email address is mharrison@harrisonlawaz.com. And I can certainly at least route you to my staff members who can specifically help you as well. And then also the phone number as well can be reached at. I mean, utilizing the international code, which it sounds like it's 1-480 320-2310. That's my general number. And again, my staff is catered towards businesses and those who own or operate businesses. So they can certainly route you to the right individuals at my firm that can help you too as well.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Matthew. And thank you to our listeners. If you enjoyed this, please like or subscribe where you're listening. And of course, if you know somebody that would benefit from this conversation, individually share it with them. So thank you so much and good luck in your journey to Arizona business.
Well, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed our time together.
Great. Thank you.